Hello dear students, I Professor Agam Dalal on behalf of JK Shah Classes welcomes you all in this RTP discussion video for November 2023 CA Final Direct Tax. A wonderful RTP has been prepared. Now let us see one by one without wasting much of your time. And first I'll discuss all the main points which are covered in that question, and then we'll quickly see the solution of that questions, and we'll go through the entire RTP. Case scenario number 1, that is the very good MCQ case study they have prepared, which is based on main two sections. 133A, which is regarding survey ka power. 133B is like door-to-door survey, where the power to collect information is there. Now in section 133A, you all are knowing that there are three kind of survey which can happen. One regarding business, profession या trust activity. Second is regarding TDS, TCS. And third is regarding any event, occasion, etc. If any survey is with regards to business profession, so a person, that is the AO, with the prior approval of higher authorities, can enter into the business premises within business hours. Within business hours. And he can even impound the books of account and other documents also up to 15 working days. If he wants to impound it for more than 15 working days, he wants to retain it for more than 15 working days, then higher authority approval is required. Here there is no power to seize any cash, etc. The survey which is regarding TDS, TCS, in that AO can enter your business premise after sunrise, before sunset. There is no time to exit the premise. And in this kind of survey, nothing can be retained, nothing can be impounded. Acha, section 133B, which says that power to collect certain information, door-to-door survey. Now in that also, at what time you can enter the premise, and that is business hours. Business hours. Here also there is no kind of power to retain any kind of books of account or other documents. Acha, section 148, it is regarding case reopening. Section 147, reassessment. Notice can be issued under section 148. Time limit is given under section 149. Section 149 says that if any kind of income, expense, asset, etc. has escaped the assessment for a period of less than or equal to 50 lakhs, up to 3 years from end of assessment year, reassessment can happen. But if this has escaped the assessment more than 50 lakhs, up to 10 years from end of assessment year, the reassessment can happen. But before issuing notice under section 148, the notice under section 148A has to be issued with prior authority approval, with prior authority of, that is the prior approval of higher authority mentioned under section 151. But if this reassessment is regarding any search or requisition of 132 or 132A, in that case 148A is not required. Directly 148 can be issued with prior approval of higher authorities. Now based on all of this information, let us start reading this case scenario number 1. The assessing officer with prior approval of Chief Commissioner of Income Tax surveyed the business premise of A Limited. So first of all, the survey is happening A Limited within of its jurisdiction at 9 p.m. So the survey started at 9 p.m. Entry taken at 9 p.m. for the purpose of obtaining information which may be relevant to proceedings under Income Tax Act 1961. So this survey is with regards to any business or profession. So section is 133A. The survey operation continued till 11 p.m. on 5th. Acha, so whatever is the time of exit, that we don't have to see. We have to see the time of entry. On 15th June 22, AO entered the business premise of B Limited. So now B Limited, which was also within the jurisdiction at 8:30 p.m. So this survey started at 8:30 p.m. But the word survey has not been used anywhere for B Limited. Now this is for the purpose of collecting information which may be useful for the purpose of Income Tax Act 1961. So this they are talking about door-to-door survey, which is 133B, power to collect certain information. They left the premise at 9:30 p.m. Again, there is no time for exit. There is only one time for entry. Now what they are saying, the business premise of A Limited is kept open for business every day between 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. That is, business hours is given 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Can I say here, 133A, a person can enter the business premise during business hours. Business hours is 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And just because of that, the assessing officer has rightly entered into the place of A Limited, because it has been entered within business hours. The business premise of B Limited is kept open for business every day in between 9:30 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. So again, as per 133B, a person can enter into business hours. And even for B Limited also, AO has entered the premise within business hours, that is 9:30 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. So both the action of entering to the premise is well within the law, it is within business hours. In both the above cases, AO impounded and retained in custody for a period of 12 days, inclusive of holidays, books of account and other document inspected by him after recording the reason for doing so. So over here, 12 working days, the books are retained. That is okay, because up to 15 days books can be retained. But so far as 133B is concerned, there is no power of retention of books of account. That has been done wrongly. In case of B Limited, books cannot be retained. The assessing officer, however, did not make any specific permission for Chief Commissioner for the same. See over here, up to 15 days, no requirement of any specific approval. So it is okay. It is okay, it is valid. Whereas in 133B, the action taken to retain the book itself is invalid. Even with prior approval also it cannot be done. Further, in July 2022, business premise of C Limited was searched after following the due procedure laid down in section 132. Consequent to the which AO has in possession certain document showing information pertaining to shares, value of which is 28 lakh purchased in the year 16-17 and the share value of 21 lakh purchased in the year 17-18. So first of all, in case of C Limited, search has happened under 132, for which the case will get reopened under 148. But for this, 148A is not required because it has been after the search, and that's why directly 148 can be issued. However, the shares which has escaped the assessment, shares are covered within the definition of asset. The total value of the asset which has escaped the assessment is 49 lakh, that is less than or equal to 50 lakh. So in what time, up to what time reassessment can happen? It can happen up to 3 years from end of assessment year. Because if it is more than 50 lakh, then 10 years from end of assessment year. Now based on this, let us refer one by one each and every question. Is the action of assessing officer in entering the business premise of A Limited at 9 p.m. and continuing the survey operation till 11 p.m. valid? First of all, let us discuss about A Limited. It entered in at 9 p.m. which is within business hours. There is no time given for exit the business premise. So yes, for A Limited, the action taken by AO is valid. Also, is the action of AO in entering the business premise of B Limited at 8:30 p.m. is valid? Even for B Limited also it is valid, because in section 133B they have said you can enter the premise in business hours. There is no mention about sunrise and sunset. So even this is also valid. So answer should come, both the action of AO is valid. So yes, the action taken by AO in both the cases are valid. Obviously the answer has to be what? A. So the answer is what? A. Second, is the action of AO in impounding and retaining books of account and other document of A Limited and B Limited after recording reason for doing so is valid, where the specific permission of Chief Commissioner has not been taken? So I said in section 133A, so far as business profession ka survey is concerned, A Limited can retain the books up to 15 working days without taking any prior approval. So the action taken for A Limited is valid. However, the action taken in case of B Limited is not valid because section 133B does not give such power of any kind of retention. So the action taken in case of A Limited is valid, B Limited is not valid. So action is valid in case of A Limited but not in case of B Limited. The answer has to be what? C. Can the assessing officer issue the notice under section 148 to A Limited in August 2022 in respect of assessment year 1920, 2021, 21-22 consequent to the survey conducted under business premise? Now understand one thing. If there is any survey and after that case is getting reopened, then before issuing 148, 148A is to be issued. In case of search, 148A is not required. In case of survey, it is required. Now up to what time case can get reopened? So sir, we need how much income is concealed. Let's say they have not given. Let us assume bare minimum, less than or equal to 50 lakh. Still, the case can get reopened up to 3 years from end of assessment year. Now if they are talking about the very first assessment year 1920, assessment year 1920 gets completed on 31st March 2020 and 3 years get completed on 31st March 2023. And don't you think so? In August 2022, obviously section 148 can be sent. Similar is the case for this 2 assessment year also, because we are sending the notice of 148 within 3 years from end of assessment year. And that's why the action is correct. However, what you need to issue first, 148A, and then you can issue what? 148. So the first option, no, nahi, yes. Yes, he can do so. Compliance stipulated in 148, not nahi, it is necessary. So this is not right, this is not right. Yes, he can do so after following the compliance of 148, yes. This is the right answer. C is the right answer. Then, would the action of assessing officer in entering the premises of A Limited at 9 p.m. and impounding and retaining the books of account been valid if he had surveyed A Limited only for the purpose of verifying whether tax has been deducted or collected in accordance with the provision of Income Tax Act? First of all, if the survey is regarding TDS, TCS, then the time to enter into the business premise is after sunrise but before sunset. And in this survey, there is no power given to retain anything. So here if the survey is regarding TDS, TCS, then entering at 9 p.m. is also not valid. Impounding and retaining the books of account, it is also not valid. Both the option would have been wrong. So no, the action of AO in entering the business premise at 9 p.m. and impounding retaining books is not valid. This is the right answer. Both the action will not be valid. Can the assessing officer issue the notice under section 148 for bringing the tax for income escaping assessment in case of C Limited without following the compliance stipulated in 148A? First of all, for C Limited, search has took place under section 132, and when search has taken place under 132, 148A is not required. You can directly issue 148 with prior approval of higher authorities. However, here in this case, for C Limited, the value of the shares which has escaped the assessment is less than or equal to 50 lakh. Then don't you think so that we can reopen the case only up to 3 years from end of assessment year? And the shares which has escaped the assessment was purchased somewhere in 16, 17, 17, 18. So obviously 3 years have already elapsed from the end of assessment year. So we can definitely issue 148 without 148A in this case, but here we cannot, because the shares which has escaped the assessment is having the value less than or equal to 50 lakh. So what will be the right answer? Yes, he can do so. No. No, he cannot. He can do so only after following compliance. No, he cannot do so. No, he cannot issue 148 since the 3-year time period from end of relevant assessment year has expired. This is the right answer. So in the fifth, C point is there. Can the AO issue the notice of 148 for bringing the tax of escaping assessment in case of C Limited without the compliance of 148A if the share purchased instead of 28 lakh it is 30 lakh? So now understand, for 16-17 it will be 30 lakh K shares, and in the remaining year it will be 21 lakh. So now the total share value will become 51 lakh, which is more than 50 lakh. So now though we can reopen the case up to 10 years from end of assessment year. And just because the case has got reopened without issuing because of survey under 132, and that's why notice of 148A is not required. You can directly start the proceeding of 148 up to 10 years from end of assessment year. Yes, he can do so with the prior approval of specified authority under 151. This is the right answer. 6A. Correct. So that first case scenario is done. Now let us move to the second case scenario. Before we move to second case scenario, let us discuss something about this. It is a very good question on cooperative society. Under cooperative society ka taxation, we all have learnt that a cooperative society will get either old regime or new regime. New regime, section 115BAD, wherein directly 22 plus 10% surcharge plus 4% cess, that is 25.168% tax is there. Under old regime, the tax is like up to 10,000 10%, 10,000 to 20,000 20%, above 20,000 30%, and on that surcharge will apply. If income is in between 1 crore to 10 crore, 7%, more than 10 crore, 12%, and on that 4% cess. However, when you follow old regime, you can get a deduction of 80p. But if you go into the new regime, 80p deduction is not applicable, is not available. Second, in old or new, in any one of them, the deduction of 80JJAA can be availed. 80JJAA is available in both the cases. However, when you follow old system and you have taken 80JJAA, alternate minimum tax ka concept is applicable because of 80JJAA. See, because of 80p, AMT does not get attracted because it says you have claimed any of the deduction of heading C except 80p. So because of 80p, alternate minimum tax cannot come. Because of 80JJAA, it can. But if you are following new regime, even though you are having 80JJAA ka deduction, AMT is not applicable because if you follow 115 BAD, alternate minimum tax is not applicable. Now based on all this, let us read one by one. Following are the details about Alpha Cooperative Society, referred as Alpha Cooperative. Second is Beta Cooperative Society, referred as Beta Cooperative. And third is Gamma Cooperative Bank, which is referred as Cooperative, Gamma Cooperative. For the year 22-23, Alpha Cooperative is engaged in providing credit facilities solely to its member. The profit and gain is 20 lakh, which is computed. Alpha Cooperative also receives interest of rupees 3 lakh from investment in Delta Cooperative Society. Now, first of all, if any cooperative society is giving credit facility to its member and earning the profit because of that, it is 100% deductible under section 80p. Similarly, if any cooperative society is getting interest because of investment in any other cooperative society, even that interest and dividend is also 100% deductible under section 80p. So if over here Alpha is following old regime, under section 80p 100% deduction is available for 20 lakh also, for 3 lakh also. But if it will apply to new regime, then 80p will not apply. On this 23 lakh, company has to pay, that is cooperative society directly has to pay 25.168%. Further, Beta Cooperative is engaged in marketing agricultural produce grown by its member, the profit and gain from which is 40 lakh. So again, on this 40 lakh, definitely 80p is available if they are following old regime, because if a cooperative society is engaged into marketing of agricultural produce which is produced by its member, 80p deduction is available. Further, it has employed 8 new employees with a salary of 22,000 per month on 1st June 2022. Salary is paid by electronic clearing system through bank account. It gets its books of account audited under section 44AB. So if a person is audited under 44AB, employing any additional employee during the year, paying the salary by banking method, a deduction of 80JJAA is available, which is 30% of additional employee cost. How much is additional employee cost? So 22,000 per month engaged from 1st June, that is 10 month, into how many employees? 8 employees. So total additional employee cost is 17,60,000 and deduction I will get is 30% for continuous 3 years, that is 5,28,000. Acha, the salary is less than 25,000 per month, up to 25,000 per month, hence I can claim 80JJAA. Employees are engaged for even more than 240 days in a year, and that's why they become eligible employee. Now 80JJAA is available in old system also, in new system also. But if you apply 80JJAA in old system, alternate minimum tax will get applied. If you apply 80JJAA in new system, AMT will not apply because in section 115 BAD, AMT becomes irrelevant. It also earns interest of rupees 12 lakh on a fixed deposit with Axis Bank and ICICI Bank, which are not cooperative society. So this 12 lakh rupees of interest is not eligible for 80p because they are not, it is not interest from other cooperative society, you understand? Then Gamma Cooperative is engaged into a banking business in Bangalore. Profit and gain from which is 110 lakh, which is computed. Now if there is a cooperative bank other than primary cooperative agricultural society or rural development bank, 80p is not available. So for Gamma, it is a normal cooperative bank, 80p ka deduction is not at all available. and the profit and gain they have given is 110 lakh. Now based on all this, would Alpha Cooperative Bank and Gamma Cooperative Bank is entitled for deduction of ATP if they do not opt for 115 BAD? So yes, for Alpha to we saw that both the income, this 20 lakh and 3 lakh both, is 100% available for ATP. But so far as Gamma Cooperative Bank is concerned, for a cooperative bank, ATP deduction is not available. So the answer first, Alpha Cooperative Bank is entitled for ATP only for 3 lakh, wrong. Alpha Cooperative entitled to deduction in ATP only in respect of profit and gain of 20 lakh, wrong. Alpha Cooperative is entitled to deduction of ATP both for 20 lakh and 3 lakh. Gamma Cooperative is entitled to deduction of ATP, wrong. Gamma is not entitled. Alpha Cooperative is entitled both for 20 lakh and 3 lakh. Gamma Cooperative is not entitled. This is correct answer. So for 7th one, D is the right answer. Then, would the provision of alternate minimum tax will be attracted in case of Alpha Cooperative, Beta Cooperative, Gamma Cooperative if they do not opt for 115 BAD? See, if they do not opt for 115 BAD means they are going into the old system. So alternate minimum tax only comes when you are claiming any kind of deduction either of 35 AD or 10 AA or any deduction of heading C, that is 80 IA to 80 IC etc. except ATP. So here because of ATP, AMT cannot come. And only one deduction is 80 JJAA which is there in this question, which can attract AMT, and this is claimed only by Beta Cooperative Bank. So only Beta Cooperative Society can claim, will be liable for alternate minimum tax. Other two will not. So the AMT would be attracted only for Alpha Gamma, no. AMT is attracted only in case of Alpha Beta, no. AMT would be attracted only for Beta, yes. For 8th, D is the right answer. Then, what would be the tax liability rounded off of Beta Cooperative Limited if it opt section 115 BAD, wherein ATP deduction is not applicable, ATJAA is applicable, AMT is not applicable. Now if it opt for 115 BAD, I have written over here something, if they opt for 115 BAD, then over here the gross total income they have given in the question, they have two kind of income, one is 40 lakh, one is 12 lakh. So GTI will be 52 lakh. From that only one deduction is available, 80 JJAA, and that we already calculated 5,28,000. So total income becomes 46,72,000. On that directly we have to apply 25.168%, and that's why the tax liability rounded off is 11,75,850. So the answer is 11,75,850, and yes, the option is D. What will be the tax liability of Beta Cooperative Bank if it does not opt for 115 BAD, wherein ATP ka deduction is available? So if we go into the old regime, ATP is also available, 80 JJAA is also applicable. Okay. Now, it does not opt for 115 BAD, AMT provision, if applicable, have to be considered. So now understand, if we opt for 115 BAD, sorry, if we do not opt for 115 BAD, that means, so first, so I have to write my gross total income, that is 52 lakh. From that I will get ATP ka deduction, which is 40 lakh. 12 lakh rupees is not eligible for ATP ka deduction. From that I have to deduct 80 JJAA, and that become 5,28,000. So how much total income I will get? 52 lakh minus 40 lakh minus 5,28,000, that becomes 6,72,000. On that, what is my normal tax liability? Above 20,000, 30%. So 672 minus 20,000 into 30%. Up to 10,000, 10%, that is 1,000. 10,000 to 20,000, 20%, that will be 2,000. Plus 4% health and education cess, rounded off to 2,06,540. This will become tax payable. No, this is normal tax. Also, I need to calculate alternate minimum tax because I am claiming 80 JJAA. What is my total income? 6,72,000. Add back 80 JJAA. 5,28,000 you need to add back. So now my adjusted total income will become exact 12 lakh. For cooperative society, what is the alternate minimum tax rate? 15%, not 18.5%. So 12 lakh into 15% plus 4% health and education says 1,87,200. Ultimately what I have to pay? Whichever is higher, and that will be 2,06,540. So my answer is in option number B. That will be the answer. Would it be beneficial for alpha cooperative, beta cooperative and gamma cooperative to opt for section 115 BAD? It may be assumed that gross total income remains same in both. First of all, let us discuss something about alpha. For alpha, entire income is eligible for ATP, and if we'll apply for new, ATP is not applicable, tax will come. So I can definitely say na, for alpha the old system is better, 100% income will get deductible, and that's why zero tax will come. For beta cooperative, we just did the calculation wherein we saw that going into 115 BAD will have more tax, whereas going into old will have lower tax. So for B also old is beneficial. So far as gamma is concerned, ATP was not at all applicable. So while it will go in old regime, it will have to pay 30% tax also, whereas in the new regime only 25.168% tax. So obviously for gamma what is beneficial? 115 BAD. So for alpha and beta old is beneficial, for gamma 115 BAD is beneficial. So it will be beneficial for gamma to go for 115 BAD but not for alpha and beta. The option has to be D. Then moving toward the very next question, a very wonderful question they have drafted on 194R, which based on a CBDT circular. See, 194R means whenever any value of any benefit or perquisite is being paid, when any benefit or perquisite is given to any kind of dealer, supplier, etc., TDS under section 194R is to be deducted at the rate 10% if the value is going above 20,000. However, if you are giving any kind of benefit to a dealer, calling him for a business conference, whatever is the expenditure done for that dealer on their business conferences, that is not to be called as a perquisite, on that no TDS under 194R. But if the dealer is having any overstay, that is preceding and succeeding this business conference, and you are bearing all the cost of hotel, expense, etc., that is called as perquisite. But in that, remember, 1 day preceding and 1 day after the conference is not to be called as overstay. That is to be included within the business conference day itself. Whatever is the cost, if any spouse is coming with the dealer and you are handling the cost of that spouse ka traveling to and fro, hotel accommodation, etc., this is totally called as perquisite, and on that obviously you need to deduct TDS. Now let us understand this question. ABC Limited held a dealer conference on 22nd and 23rd August in Cochin to educate the dealers about the new product being launched by it and how the product is better than the similar product of other companies available in the market. So whatever the expenditure will be on to and fro, hotel accommodation, food expense for 22nd, 23rd for the dealer plus one preceding date, that is 21st August, that all will not be called as any kind of benefit. On that TDS is not to be deducted. The spouse was allowed to accompany the dealer and they could stay in the hotel from 20th August itself. Now, the spouse is also accompanying the dealer and staying 4 days, 20, 21, 22, 23. So yes, whatever expenditure will be done for spouse on this entire 4 days will be counted as a business benefit. However, whatever is the benefit for the dealer for 3 days, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, it won't be counted as business benefit. It won't be counted as benefit and won't be deductible for 194R, but whatever will be the expenditure for 20th August, that is called as overstay, on that TDS will be deducted. Further, leisure trip was organized for dealers and their spouse on 20th and 21st August, being the weekend. The expense on airfare, hotel stay and this trip is met by ABC Limited. See, whatever is the expenditure on this trip, that entirely will be called as benefit. And for that TDS is to be deducted. Now see what they have given. The breakup of all the expenditure incurred by ABC Limited. One by one we have to decide whether it is business benefit or not. To and fro airfare of Mr. Ashok Sharma from New Delhi, who is a dealer. So this expense is not called as business benefit. It is said by CBDT circular, no TDS of 194R. To and fro airfare for Mrs. Ashok Sharma for New Delhi. If spouse is accompanied with dealer, this is called as benefit. 25,000 is liable for TDS deduction. hotel stay, including breakfast and dinner for Mrs. and Mr. Ashok Sharma on 20th and 21st August, that is before business conference. Total expense is 30,000. The expenditure is equal for each person each day. Now understand, half expense is for Mr. Sharma, half expense is for Mrs. Sharma. Whatever is the expense for Mrs. Sharma, it is totally a business benefit, that is 15,000 is totally a business benefit. Now remaining 15,000 expense is for Mr. Sharma. But 20th August and 21st August both are not called as overstay. Only 20th August is called as overstay. 21st August is a preceding date to business conference. So that is included in business conference. And that expense is not a business benefit. So entire 15,000 is not a business benefit. Only that extra day which they have stayed for, 7,500. That will be called as business benefit for Mr. Sharma. So for spouse, entire expense is business benefit. For dealer himself, only one day ka jo staying expense, that is called as business benefit. Acha, hotel stay, including breakfast and dinner for Mrs. Sharma and Mr. Sharma on 22nd and 23rd August, 28,000. Now understand, these are the days of business conference. On that, whatever expense is done for Mr. Sharma, it is not a business benefit. Whatever expense is done for Mrs. Sharma, that is called as business benefit. Expenditure will be equal. So 14,000 being half of the expense done for Mrs. Sharma is a business benefit. But entire expense done for Mr. Sharma is not a business benefit. Expense on leisure trip on 20th and 21st August attributable to both of them. Now that is the entirely business benefit. It is not a part of business conference. Conference expense on 22nd and 23rd attributable to Mr. Ashok Sharma. Now this is the conference expense. Even this is not called as any extra perquisite. Now these are called as extra perquisite. So now do the total of this: 25,000 plus 15,000 plus 7,500 plus 14,000 plus 22,000, total 83,500. Answer has to be C. Yes, C. Now compute the specified income taxable at 30% under section 115 BBI in case of a registered charitable trust addued running an educational institution from the information given below. Now understand what section 115 BBI says. In case of a trust, if the trust is having any kind of corpus donation but not invested in 11 clause 5, having any kind of accumulation of last years which is not invested in 11 clause 5, any kind of set apart of which violation is done, like it is donated to somebody, then on that also 115 BBI will be attracted directly 30% tax. Any kind of expenditures which are done for specified person. Specified person means what? Like trustee, relative of trustee, donor who is donating more than 50,000 or even their relatives, manager etc., their relatives, settler, their relatives, they are called as specified person. Whatsoever expense you have done for the benefit of this specified person, on that also directly 30% will apply. However, if to this specified person any educational facility or hospital related facility is given, it is not to be taxed at the rate of 30%. On that, exemptions will be available, that is the expenditures etc. can be claimed. Now understand, one by one they have given each and every activity which a trust has done. Corpus donation received by the trust, total 12,20,000. So obviously this total 12,20,000 has to be invested in the modes referred in 11 clause 5. However, it has been invested as follows. Deposit in post office saving bank account rupees 2 lakh, which is a valid investment as per 11 clause 5. Fixed deposit of State Bank of India 5 lakh, which is a valid investment as per 11 clause 5. Deposit with Cooperative Land Development Bank, that is also a valid investment as per 11 clause 5. Deposit with a NBFC engaged in retail car finance, it is not an investment of 11 clause 5. So the first violation is having 4,10,000 rupees. Then income applied by the trust for the benefit of following donors. A donor becomes specified person, related person only when he has donated more than 50,000 in the financial year. Valish has donated 24,000, Ritesh has donated 48,000. These two are not called as specified person. So whatever is the expenditure done for the benefit of these two donors, are not to be treated under section 115 BBI. But the Mr. Arjun who has donated 96,000, that is more than 50,000 in the financial year, he is a specified person. And what is the expenditure done for the benefit of this donor? 30,000. So now this 30,000 will be taxed under section 115 BBI. Income applied by the trust for the benefit of Mr. Vaibhav Gupta, who is a trustee of the trust, 25,200. Whatever you have applied for the benefit of the trustee, it is a violation, and that's why 25,200 will be directly taxed at the rate of 30%. Income applied by the trust for the benefit of Mr. Shyam Lal and Manohar Arora and Mr. Sridhar Agrawal, being the employees of the trust, by way of interest-free loan to them for pursuing higher education, 32,000. Employees of the trust are not covered within the definition of 13.3. They are not called a specified person. So whatever expense has been done for their benefit, it is a normal charitable educational expense. On that, 115 BBI is not applicable. Value of educational services made available by the trust through its educational institution to the two children of Vaibhav Gupta. Now see, you are giving the benefit to the children of trustee, but the benefit is in relation to educational activity. It will never be taxable under 115 BBI. It is okay. Value of educational services made available by the trust through its educational institution to the children of Manohar Arora and Sridhar Agrawal. They are the employee of the trust. Anyways, for them specified person will not come. For them 115 BBI not attracted at all. Amount set apart last year, that is 21-22, by the trust for charitable purpose under section 11 clause 2 for making donation to other charitable trust in current year. From the amount which has been set apart, you cannot give any kind of donation. If you are giving donation from the set apart amount, it is a violation. So it will be taxed under 115 BBI, that is 2,13,000 will be taxed under section 115 BBI. Now tell me, what is the total violation amount? The total violation amount that I have written over here comes to 6,78,200. So on what amount 30% will apply? 678,200. Option is what? A. Yes. Then ABC Limited has failed to deduct tax, that is TDS, on the payment to contractor during the year 22-23, even though the payment exceeded the threshold limit of 194C. So definitely interest will be applicable, penalty will be applicable. Now the another company is XYZ Limited. It has deducted TDS 62 lakh at source on the payment to contractor on the time, during the year, on the time, but not remitted the same up to 31st March 24. So I hope you understand, when TDS is deducted but not remitted, it is a bigger crime, it is a bigger offense. On that though, even prosecution can also start. Which statement is correct? Interest under section 201 clause 1A and penalty under 271C, which is up to levied by JCIT up to the amount of TDS not deducted, and prosecution under 276 would be attracted both in the hands of ABC and XYZ. For ABC Limited, you can never start the prosecution of 276B because it has not deducted TDS. Prosecution comes only when you have deducted but not deposited. So option A cannot come. Interest under section 201 clause 1A and penalty under 271C would be attracted for ABC Limited. Interest under 201 clause 1A, penalty under 271C and prosecution under 276 would be attracted for XYZ. All the three things can't come together, na? Interest also, penalty also, prosecution also. No. So this is also wrong. Interest under 201 1A and penalty under 271C will be attracted in ABC Limited, which seems right. Interest under 201 1A and prosecution of 276 will be attracted in case of XYZ. This seems right. The option is C. See, penalty, prosecution both can't come together, na? Last, 15th. Mr. X, a resident Indian, is in receipt of income from Ganga REIT, Yamuna REIT and Indus REIT in the year 22-23, the particulars of which are as follows. Fine. Before we move to this, real estate investment trust. It can invest more than 50% in an Indian company which is called as Special Purpose Vehicle SPV. SPV will pay dividend to REIT and REIT will pay the dividend amount to whom? To the ultimate unit holder. which includes sponsors also. When this SPV will pay dividend to REIT, TDS will not be deducted. When this REIT will pay this dividend to unit holder, TDS will be deducted, because any dividend income received by REIT from SPV is exempt. However, when REIT is paying this dividend to unit holder, for ultimate unit holder, it will be taxable. REIT is behaving like a pass-through entity. So that dividend will be taxable to unit holder. However, it will be taxable to unit holder only if SPV has opted 115BAA, because in that case SPV would have paid lower tax. So let us tax unit holder also. In that case REIT will deduct TDS. But what if that SPV has not opted 115BAA? Means company has paid more tax on the profit. So ultimately for unit holder this dividend will become exempt. And if it becomes exempt, TDS will not be deducted. But understand the case when dividend becomes exempt. A very few cases are left in our Income Tax Act where dividend becomes exempt. One of the case when SPV has not opted 115BAA, then dividend to the unit holder become exempt. Now when dividend to unit holder become exempt, in that case dividend stripping concept is applicable. Now what is dividend stripping? Section 94 subsection 7. If the unit of which dividend is exempt, you have purchased those units at least 3 months prior to the record date and you sold the same within 9 months after the record date. And if loss is arising on transfer of this, that loss will be ignored. That loss will be ignored up to the amount of dividend. Up to the amount of dividend. Now based on all this, let us read further. Ganga REIT, special purpose vehicle is A Limited, which has opted for 115BAA. Now if opted for 115BAA, for the unit holder, the dividend will be taxable. TDS will be deducted. So here dividend is taxable. For the unit holder, obviously. For REIT it is exempt. Yamuna REIT invested in B Limited, which has not opted for 115BAA. So this 35,000 will become exempt dividend for even unit holder also. TDS will not be deducted. However, you understand the dividend is declared in June 22, whereas the unit was purchased on 1st January 22, 3 months prior. Dividend stripping concept is not applicable. 94(7) is not applicable. In this REIT invested in C Limited, which does not opt 115BAA, so even this 42,000 is also what? Exempt. But declared in June 22, whereas the units were purchased on 1st April 22. Yes, dividend stripping concept can be applicable if sold within 9 months. TDS will not be attracted because dividend is exempt. The record date is 1st June 22 for all the 3 REIT. Are Ganga, Yamuna and Indus required to deduct TDS on dividend component of the income received from SPV distributed to Mr. X? Also would be the dividend stripping provision of 94(7) will be attracted if Mr. X sells the unit held by all the 3 REIT in January 23, that is within 9 months from this record date. First of all, the answer I have already said, that dividend will be taxable in case of Ganga. TDS will be deducted. Dividend stripping will not be applicable. For Yamuna, dividend is exempt, so TDS is also exempt, but dividend stripping is also not applicable because purchase 3 months prior. For the unit holder of Indus REIT, dividend is exempt, TDS will not be attracted, but dividend stripping will be attracted. So Yamuna REIT and Indus REIT are required to deduct TDS. So Yamuna and Indus are required to deduct TDS. This is wrong, because in that case the dividend is exempt, TDS is not attracted. Yamuna REIT and Indus REIT are required to deduct TDS at the rate of 10%. So see, understand, Yamuna and Indus are not required to deduct TDS because for them dividend is exempt, unit holder. Ganga REIT is required to deduct TDS at the rate of 10%, yes. Whereas Yamuna REIT and Indus REIT are not required to deduct TDS, seems correct. Dividend stripping provision would be attracted in case of sale of unit of Yamuna REIT and Indus REIT, but not in case of Ganga. So understand, in Yamuna REIT both dividend stripping is not attracted, even this is wrong. Ganga REIT is required to deduct TDS at the rate of 10%, whereas Yamuna and Indus are not required to deduct TDS, seems correct. Dividend stripping provision would be attracted only on sale at a loss in January 23 by Mr. X, but not in case of sale of Ganga REIT and Yamuna REIT. This is correct. Dividend stripping concept is only applicable in that last wala Indus REIT, but not in the earlier two. So the answer is what? D. I hope you are understanding all these MCQs. Now let us move to the main questions which they have given, that is the descriptive one. Their main focuses are on the latest judgments which they have put in judicial pronouncement. Many chapters are being covered over here. The statement of profit and loss of Manav Limited engaged in manufacturing activity for the year ended 31st March 23 exhibit a net profit of rupees 180 lakh after debiting crediting the following items. First of all, what they have asked us. Let us read the last line. You are required to compute the total income and tax liability of Manav Limited for assessment year 23-24 with brief reasons for the treatment of each item. Manav Limited has opted for 115BAA. It has opted for 115BAA. So understand, additional depreciation is not applicable. Deductions of chapter 6A not applicable. However, 80JJAA can be claimed. 80M can be claimed. Acha, donation to scientific research not available. In-house research is available. MAT concept is not applicable because 115BAA is followed and tax will be levied directly at 25.168%. Now obviously our answer will start with PGBP head and the profit which they have given is 180 lakhs. So let us start the answer with 180 lakhs. That is 1 crore 80 lakhs. It is after debiting or crediting the following items. Whatever is given from point number A to point number N is already dealt with in the P&L. Interest of rupees 24 lakh relating to financial year 22-23 which is settled by issuing 8% debenture of rupees 100 each in August 2023. Section 43B says whatever is the interest which is payable to bank or financial institution, it is allowed as a deduction only if it is paid up to the due date of filing return of income under section 139 subsection 1. In case of company, 31st October of assessment year. However, explanation of 43B says that if such unpaid interest is converted into any kind of loan, bond, debenture, etc., it won't be counted as the actual payment and hence deduction is not available. Whereas you have converted your interest into debenture, but still you have debited the P&L. How you can debit the P&L? It is not allowed as a deduction. 24 lakh rupees will be added back. So 24 lakh rupees we have to add back. Then income tax assessment of assessment year 21-22 is completed in September 22 with a tax demand of 5,80,000, which includes surcharge of 50,700, cess of 22,308. Entire sum is duly paid during the year. First of all, as per section 40 clause A, income tax paid is never allowed as a deduction. And now the one clarification has been added with retrospective effect. Surcharge and cess is deemed included in income tax. That is also not allowed as a deduction. So this 5,80,000 will totally be disallowed. So 5,80,000 will be totally disallowed. Then provision for gratuity based on actuarial valuation is 180 lakh. They have not said that company has maintained any approved gratuity fund. So provision of gratuity is disallowed as per 40A subsection 7. What is allowed? Actual payment of gratuity is allowed. Let us see whether after this in additional information they have given anything regarding gratuity. Yes, actual gratuity paid during the year is 105 lakh. So how much deduction is allowed? 105 lakh. Whereas you have debited 180 lakh. How much excess provision is debited? 75 lakh. So how much will be disallowed? 75 lakh. Expenditure incurred toward foreign travel of director 6.5 lakh to closure opening of a branch in a foreign country to market its product in the said foreign country. Whether in any of the provision foreign traveling expense of director is disallowed, the answer is no. This is allowed as a deduction as already debited in the P&L. We don't have to do anything further. Paid 82,000 for purchase of a raw material on 26 January 2023 by making a payment in cash to the supplier in a single day. Section 40A subsection 3. If any payment made to a single person in a single day more than 10,000, otherwise then by account pay, check, draft, ECS, other electronic mode, that entire expense is to be disallowed. So here entire 82,000 is to be what? Disallowed. But sir, 26 January, public holiday, that kind of exception has been removed years back. Rule 6DD don't have any kind of exception regarding public holiday. So even though paid on 26 January, still 82,000 rupees will be what? Added back. Paid rupees 11 lakh to STINC of Japan for online digital advertisement. STINC has no permanent establishment in India. No tax was deducted nor was equalization levy paid on the said amount. If a resident person or a non-resident person having permanent establishment in India paying anything to a non-resident not having permanent establishment in India for some online digital marketing, 6% equalization levy is to be collected. Here, you were supposed to deduct 6% equalization levy while making the payment to STINC because it is not having any PE in India, whereas you have not deducted equalization levy, and that's why section 40 clause A, 100% of that expense will be disallowed, and that's why 11 lakh rupees will be disallowed, 40 clause A subclause 1B. Incurred 4,60,000 on activities related to corporate social responsibility as mentioned under section 135 of Companies Act. Explanation 2 of section 37 subsection 1. Any activity which is in regards to corporate social responsibility, that expenditure will be disallowed. So 4,60,000 disallowed. Sold a vacant land to its wholly owned subsidiary, that is Pital Private Limited, Mumbai. The long-term capital gain 18 lakh is credited to the statement of P&L. First of all, it is to be dealt with by capital gain chapter. So 18 lakh we have to reduce from PGBP. But understand, it won't be taxable in capital gain also, because there is a exception given in section 47 that if any wholly owned holding company giving transfer of any capital asset to wholly owned Indian subsidiary, it won't be regarded as a transfer. So this capital gain is exempted in capital gain also. It will be reduced from PGBP. It won't be added in capital gain. So 18 lakh rupees we have to reduce from PGBP. 18 lakh rupees deducted. Paid rupees 2,20,000 to a university as a donation to be used for research in social science approved under section 35. 1.2 lakh paid by bank, something by cash. In section 35, payment mode has not been prescribed. That is okay. Problem is, you have followed 115BAA, and when you follow 115BAA, donation for scientific research under section 35 is disallowed. So this 2,20,000 will be disallowed. It will be added back. Then interim dividend distributed during the year 65 lakh, and you have debited the same into P&L, because it has been said now that all the adjustment is after debit or credit the P&L. Now how you can debit the dividend amount in the P&L? So 65 lakh rupees has to be what? Added back. It is not an expense, na? Contributed rupees 60 lakh toward employee pension notified fund by central government under 80 CCD calculated at 15% of aggregate salary and DA forming part. Now understand, section 36, what it says that whatever a company or a person contribute to the pension plan of employee, only 10% of salary will be allowed as a deduction. Salary means basic plus DA percentage. Now they have contributed at the rate of 15%, 60 lakh rupees, allowed only 10%. So 5% will be disallowed. So tell me, 60 lakh rupees is 15%, then how much will be 5%? 20 lakh. So 20 lakh rupees will be disallowed, which is excess contribution. Depreciation 36 lakh. Obviously, whatever is the normal depreciation as per Companies Act, that is to be disallowed. 36 lakh is by way of dividend received from Knight Pte of Singapore, in which Manav Limited has 28% voting power. Now this is credited in the P&L. Any dividend which is received is an income of IFOS. So this 36 lakh is not an income of PGBP. Dividend is always an income of IFOS. So first we will deduct the same from PGBP and we will add this 36 lakh into what? IFOS. However, there is a section called ATM. When you receive any dividend from a foreign company or domestic company or business trust, you pay to your shareholder up to 1 month prior to the due date of filing return of income. Then dividend received or dividend distributed, whichever is lower, that will be allowed as a deduction. 36 lakh is received, 65 lakh is distributed, whichever is lower, 36 lakh. And that too within the due date. And that's why 36 lakh will be allowed as a deduction in ATM. Even though you are following 115BAA, ATM deduction is available. So yes, 36 lakh I will claim as ATM ka deduction. Then paid rupees 6 lakh as a donation to recognized political party by account payee cross check. Whatever donation you are giving to political party, first of all, it is not a business expense. So it has to be disallowed while calculating PGBP income. But remember one thing, this is allowed as a deduction under 80GGB to an Indian company. But this company is following 115BAA, even 80GGB is not available. That's why no deduction. Then additional information. Normal depreciation 62 lakh, additional depreciation 24 lakh. I can't claim additional depreciation because I'm following 115BAA. I can only claim normal depreciation. So 62 lakh rupees is allowed as a deduction. Brought forward unabsorbed depre, which is totally from normal depreciation, is 14 lakh. This I can deduct. If it belonged to additional depreciation, I would not have deducted because I'm following 115BAA. But this belongs to normal depreciation, so even 14 lakh ka unabsorbed depre I can deduct from my business income, even from IFOS income also. And all other information is so done. So according to me, each and every adjustment we are already done with. See, every amount has a tick in the answer that has to be there. So finally, what is my total income? The total income remaining is 3 crore 42 lakhs. That is 3 crore 42,000. On that only one tax rate is applicable, 22% plus compulsory 10% surcharge plus 4% cess. Tax liability is 75 lakh 60,971. Compulsory round off 75 lakh 60,970. This is the tax payable of the company. A very good question. Question number 17. Examine the applicability of provision relating to deduction or collection of tax at source in the following cases. Delta Limited, an Indian company which was incorporated on 1st April 2022, purchases the coal from Fee Limited, another Indian company, for 75 lakh during the year 22-23 to manufacture steel. Delta Limited furnishes a declaration that such coal is used to manufacture steel and not for trading. What are the TCS and TDS implication on such transaction? If Delta Limited ka turnover is 12 crore in this current year, Fee Limited ka annual turnover ranges from 16 crore to 18 crore in last few years. First of all, purchaser, seller. Purchaser is Delta, seller is Fee. Transaction between them is 75 lakhs. So 75 lakhs is paid to the seller. Now while seller is selling coal, lignite, ore, this kind of minerals, then TCS is to be collected by seller under section 206C subsection 1. However, this TCS is not to be collected if the declaration is given that these things are purchased for manufacturing. Then 206C1 will not be attracted. So in this case, Delta is purchasing the coal for manufacturing activity, the declaration is given, and hence 206C clause 1 will not be attracted. So now the question arises, purchaser seller. For purchaser, while purchasing any kind of goods, TDS under section 194Q is attracted if no other TDS TCS is attracted. Because the first hierarchy is like first any other TDS TCS. If not applicable, then TDS under 194Q. If not applicable, then TCS under 206C clause 1H. But understand here 194Q is not attracted because Delta Limited has been incorporated on 1st April 22. 194Q is attracted when last year ka turnover is exceeding 10 crore. Here last year company was not in existence itself. So 194Q is not attracted. Now the question arises, the only last hope is 206C clause 1H, wherein the seller is having turnover more than 10 crore. And transaction value is more than 50 lakh also. TDS under 194Q has not been deducted. Whether seller will collect TCS under 206C clause 1H? Answer is no. Because it has been said that this TCS is applicable only on those goods which are not covered by 206C clause 1. Even though TCS not collected, but the goods are covered by this clause. And that's why TCS cannot be collected under 1H. So understand, here no TCS under 206C clause 1 because it is used for further manufacturing. No TDS under 194Q because last year ka turnover is not there at all. and no TCS under 206C clause 1H. The reason is because the goods are covered by clause 1. Though TCS not collected, still here also I can't collect TCS. No TDS, no TCS at all. But would your answer change if Delta Limited is incorporated on 1st April 21 and turnover of last year is exactly 10 crore? If here turnover is exactly last year ka 10 crore, then also 194Q is not attracted, because 194Q is attracted when last year ka turnover is exceeding 10 crore, not exact 10 crore. So even in that case also, no TDS, no TCS, the case is done. Then Sigma Limited, a car manufacturer, sold the following cars to the car dealers. Now first of all, if any car dealer is collecting the money for selling the car in excess of 10 lakh, 1% TCS is to be collected under section 206C clause 1F. But this TCS is not applicable if you are selling the car to the car dealers only. So here the cars are sold to the car dealers, and that's why clause 1F will not apply. So if clause 1F, that is specific section, is not applicable, then these cars are to be counted as a normal goods. Either purchaser will deduct 194Q ka TDS or seller will collect 206C clause 1H ka TCS. First 194Q will come. If not attracted, then this clause 1H ka TCS will come. Okay, now how many goods are sold? To Epsilon Limited, 120 lakh, means more than 50 lakhs. To Omega Limited, 80 lakhs, that is more than 50 lakhs. Okay. The turnover of Sigma Limited, that is the seller, is 12 crore, that is more than 10 crore. Epsilon Limited is 14 crore, so the purchaser is having turnover more than 10 crore last year. However, Omega Limited is having only 9 crore ka turnover last year. So now understand, Epsilon Limited being the purchaser, having turnover more than 10 crore last year, current year ka transaction is exceeding 50 lakh. So Epsilon Limited will deduct TDS of Sigma Limited under section 194Q. In excess of 50 lakh, what is paid? 70 lakh. On that 70 lakh, 0.1% TDS, 7000 TDS will be deducted. But so far as this Omega Limited is concerned, it can't deduct TDS under 194Q because its last year turnover is less than 10 crore. But in that case, Sigma Limited being the seller is having the turnover more than 10 crore, transaction is more than 50 lakh. TCS under 206C clause 1H will be collected by Sigma from Omega, and that is also on excess of 50 lakh, that is on 30 lakh, 0.1%, that will be 3000 rupees of TCS will be collected. However, clause 1F will not come because the sale is to the dealers. 1F is applicable only when you sell to retailers for personal consumption. Fine. Then 18th, Mrs. Element Travel is a travel agent engaged in the sale of air tickets of Airgo and Airjet Airlines. It earns standard commission at the rate 5% as well as supplementary commission. Airgo and Airjet have deducted TDS under 194H on the standard commission, which is a fixed percentage designated by International Air Transport Association. However, they have not deducted the tax on supplementary commission, which is the additional amount Element Travels charge over and above the net fare quoted by Airgo and Airjet and retained by Element Travel as its own income. Now understand what is happening over here, that there is a company Airgo and Element is a travel agent. Let's say Airgo is selling tickets to Element for 10,000 and on that fixed 5% commission is given on selling the ticket. Fixed 5%. Now Element is allowed to sell the ticket to the customers over and above 10,000 also. That becomes the profit of Element. That is called as one kind of supplementary commission given by Airgo. If Airgo would have required, then it would have directly sold the tickets to customer at higher price. But it's selling at lower price to Element and Element is selling at a higher price to customer. That becomes some indirect commission which is called as supplementary commission. Now up to now what was happening is, Airgo company was telling to the courts and to the income tax authority that we can never come to know that at which price these travel agents have sold the ticket. We can't keep the record. And that's why on this additional amount which is charged by Element from the customer to sell the ticket, which is called as supplementary commission. So let's say Element has sold the tickets to customers at 12,000. So he has earned 2,000. That is called as supplementary commission. We can never come to know about this extra 2,000. So we can't deduct the TDS. Many earlier judgments were there which said that it is correct. On this supplementary commission, TDS can't be deducted. But now all the judgments have been reversed by Supreme Court judgment. And in the Supreme Court judgment of the Singapore Airlines Limited, Royal Dutch Airlines Limited, British Airways Limited, Supreme Court has said that TDS has to be deducted even on supplementary commission also. Even on supplementary commission also TDS has to be deducted, because this is also called as indirect commission. And that's why TDS to be deducted, you need to maintain a record. Applying the rationale of Supreme Court ruling, the contention of Ergo and Airjet is not correct, that we can't deduct TDS. That contention is not correct. They are required to deduct the TDS on both fixed commission also, supplementary commission also. Then Mr. Ram, who gets his accounts audited under section 44AB, filed his return of income for the income under section 139 for assessment year 2021 on 20th December 2020, declaring income of 12 lakh, and for assessment year 21-22 on 31st October 21, declaring a loss of rupees 5 lakh. He wants to file an updated return for the income under section 139 clause 8A for assessment year 21-22 on 30th November 22, declaring his total income of rupees 7 lakh. First of all, what updated return says, it can be filed up to 2 years from end of assessment year. If you file it up to 1 year from end of assessment year, then additional tax 25% has to be paid. If you file after 1 year but before end of 2 years from end of assessment year, then you have to pay 50% additional income tax. However, if you have filed your return earlier, then now you can file the updated return only if income is increasing. If you have filed the return earlier showing loss, now you can file the updated return only for return of income. Here for assessment year 21-22, what is the date up to which updated return can be filed? From end of assessment year, 2 years, that is 31st March 24, up to 31st March 24, updated return can be filed with additional income tax. This person wants to file on 30th November 22 itself. Updated return can be filed with additional tax of 25%. However, it wants to declare income of 7 lakh. It's again a good thing. Earlier loss were there. Now he's supposed to file return of income, which can be done. And that's why updated return can be filed over here. Now, based on your answer to point number 1, what would be the time limit of completion of assessment under section 143 subsection 3 for assessment year 2021 and assessment year 21-22? The time limit is mentioned under section 153. What section 153 says? What is the time limit of completing of assessment which is mentioned under section 143 subsection 3? If it is assessment year 2021, then it is 18 months from end of assessment year. At that time, some longer period were allowed. 18 months from end of assessment year. However, if it is 21-22 assessment year, then it is 9 months from end of assessment year. The time limit has been reduced. 9 months from end of assessment year. But if it is updated return, then 9 months is from the end of the year in which updated return is filed. So here, for the assessment year 2021, it will be 18 months from end of AY, wherein for the 21-22, updated return is filed in somewhere 2022. So 9 months of the period to complete the assessment will start from the end of 22-23. That is 9 months from end of 22-23. Next. Consequent to the search under section 132 in the premise of Mr. Ajay Verma, the AO has in possession cash of rupees 160 lakh, which has not been recorded in the books of account and other document maintained in the normal course of business. Ajay Verma is engaged in the jewellery business and brought forward business loss is rupees 90 lakh, unabsorbed depreciation is rupees 30 lakh. He wants to set off brought forward business loss and unabsorbed depreciation of rupees 160 lakh, represented in the form of undisclosed money during the search. Can he do so? Basically the question is, whatever is the escaped income found during search, can you apply any brought forward loss or unabsorbed depreciation? So as per the recent amendment section 79A, no loss, whether brought forward or otherwise, or even no unabsorbed depreciation can be set off against undisclosed income included because of section 132, and hence he cannot set off this brought forward loss or even unabsorbed depreciation. So again, this was a recent amendment on which they have drafted a question. Again, arm's length price determined by tribunal which is a final fact finding authority. We all know that High Court and Supreme Court, we can make an appeal only if it is a question of law, not question of fact. Cannot be a subject matter of scrutiny by High Court, and it does not give rise to substantial question of law. Accordingly, in an appeal under 260A, the High Court is precluded from examining the correctness of determination of arm's length price. Examine the correctness of this statement with reference to recent Supreme Court ruling. A recent Supreme Court ruling has specifically said that arm's length price determination depends on the provision of the act, depends on so many other parameters, and whether the entire act has been duly followed or not. It is not merely based on fact, it is also based on some law question. And that's why determination of arm's length price is a question of law which can be dealt by High Court also. So Supreme Court has allowed in the case of SAP Labs India Private Limited that High Court is allowed to entertain the question which is regarding to determination of arm's length price. So that is again given in the judicial pronouncement wala PDF. Then analyze the tax consequences in the hands of Mr. Smith, a non-resident, for assessment year 23-24 in respect of the fees for technical services received from ABC Limited, an Indian company, in pursuance of an agreement approved by central government. Let me just remind you, there is a section 115A to a non-resident or to a foreign company. If fees for technical services is paid by any Indian company in pursuance of an agreement with central government, the concessional tax rate at the rate of 10% will be given. And if TDS is deducted at the rate of 10% plus surcharge plus cess, and you don't have any other income, return of income is not required to be filed. So many people have asked me on that doubt solving that, sir, now to technical fee 20% tax rate is applicable. Na beta, it is applicable from financial year 23-24. For you the financial year 22-23 is there, and on that 10% rate itself is applicable. Now the first point is, let's assume India has no double taxation avoidance agreement with country A. DTAA is not there. If DTAA is not there, we have to follow whatever is given in our Income Tax Act. And as per our Income Tax Act, under section 115A, on this FTS, 10% is the rate at which NR has to pay the tax. But if 100% TDS at the rate of 10% is deducted, then return of income is not supposed to be filed. Assume that Mr. Smith is a resident of country A, has no fixed place for his profession in India, and that the technical services are utilized by ABC Limited for business in India. It proves if this technical services are utilized for any purpose in India, that technical fees are deemed to accrue or arise in India as per section 9. And that's why it is chargeable to tax in India. It is the source country in which it has to be get taxed at the rate of 10%. Also examine whether Mr. Smith would be exempt from filing return of income in all the above cases if the TDS is duly deducted. If it is deducted, as I said, no other income, then no return is to be filed. Acha, India, let's assume India has a DTAA with country A which provide the tax at the rate of 8% instead of 10%. So now what will apply? Income Tax Act ka 115A says 10% is the TDS rate. DTAA says 8% is the tax rate, and hence TDS rate is also 8%. So obviously what we need to apply, DTAA ke provision or income tax ka provision, whichever is beneficial. And that's why this person will obviously tax this fees of technical services at 8%. Even the TDS will also be deducted at the rate of 8% in pursuance of DTAA. However, return of income has to be filed now. Return of income is not to be filed if TDS is deducted at the rate mentioned in 115A, which is 10%. Whereas here the TDS must have been deducted at 8%. So even though further tax is not supposed to be paid, but still return of income is required to be filed. Let's assume India has a DTAA with country A which provide the tax at the rate of 15%. So now as per DTAA 15% is the tax rate. As per income tax provision 10% is the tax rate. At what rate this person will pay the tax? He will pay the tax at the rate of 10%. TDS will be deducted at the rate of 10%. And if TDS is deducted at the rate of 10% and no other income, then again no return of income is to be filed. But understand, this DTAA ka benefit is available only when he furnishes the tax residency certificate. The tax residency certificate is but obviously required. So because of all these reasons, the answer remains light. In the first one point, 10% no return to be filed. In the second case, 8% return to be filed. In third one, 10% return not to be filed. Mr. Raj, aged 45 years, a resident of India, employed with a private company, received the following sums: basic salary, DA, etc., etc., then royalty income of some other country. So you can understand here DTAA question is there. Mr. Raj purchased a residential property, he paid something as a mediclaim, etc. is given. The rate of tax in country M is flat 12%, in country N is 20% in respect of dividend income and 15% in respect of rental income. Okay, so on dividend 20%, on rental income 15%. No standard deduction is allowed in country N from rental income. We don't have to see that. We will compute the income as per our Indian Income Tax Act. However, DTAA is not there with these two countries. If DTAA is not there, then tax relief is available under section 91, provided this person provide a tax residency certificate. Now this person is the resident in India, so first we need to calculate his entire income as if it is earned in India. We'll calculate total income tax, we'll find average income tax rate. Basic salary 62,000 per month. By the way, what they have given, assuming India does not have a DTAA with both the countries, compute total income and tax liability as per the provision of Income Tax Act. After providing deduction under section 91, assuming that Mr. Raj has not opted for 115 BAC. Great. So we have to follow the old system. Basic salary 62,000 per month. So fully it will be taxable 7,44,000. Dearness allowance is 10% of basic salary. So it will be 74,400. From that 50,000 standard deduction will be there. My net salary 768,400. Further, royalty income which is gross received from country M in respect of a literacy book 9,80,000. So as of now, we will add this gross royalty into the income, but the expense incurred for this royalty is 98,000 and this is earned from country M. So what will be added in my GTI? So it will be 980 minus 98,000, that will be 8,82,000. But the person is a resident individual and that's why on royalty related to a book, 80 QQBK deduction is available, but maximum up to rupees 3 lakh. Then rental income gross for a house property situated in country N 2,80,000. In India, deduction of 30% standard deduction will be compulsorily there. So 1,96,000. Dividend income from a company incorporated in country N 2,20,000. So this 2,20,000 taxable under IFOS. My gross total income is 20,66,400. Mr. Raj purchased a residential house in Bhopal for his residence on 1st August 22 for a consideration of 23 lakh, paid 1% stamp duty. 80C, whatever stamp duty is paid for a new house property is allowed as a deduction. 23 lakh into 1%, 23,000 is a deduction of 80C. Further, he paid 26,000 toward his health insurance premium. In 80D, mediclaim is allowed as a deduction up to 25,000. 50,000 is paid for health of his father who is a non-resident. It is allowed, but 50,000 limit will not be there because father is non-resident. The limit will still be 25,000. In total, for 80D, he will get 50,000 ka deduction. 80 QQB we discussed 3 lakh. Total income 16,93,400. Whatever is the income more than 10 lakh on that 30% plus 1,12,500 plus 4% says total tax liability comes to 3,33,341. Total income is 16,93,400. Average rate of tax is 19.6847%. But on that, we have certain foreign income. The first income that we are earning is from country M, royalty. 9,80,000 is the gross income. From that we have deducted 98,000 ka expense and 3 lakh rupees of 80 QQB ka deduction. Obviously relief is available only on the net income which is added into the total income. So how much income I have added? 5,82,000. How much relief is available under section 91? Average income tax paid in India or average income tax which is paid in that country, whichever is lower. In India you are paying 19 point something. In country M you have paid only 12%. So relief is available at the rate of 12%. 5,82,000 into 12%, you will get relief of 69,840. Now, so far as this second country is concerned, that is country number N, From that you are having two kind of income. One is dividend income, one is rental income. Now for dividend income it is 2,20,000, whereas rental income included in our income is 2,80,000 minus 30%, that is 1,96,000. That country N charges 20% on dividend, whereas our country has charged only 19.6847%. So whichever is lower, 19.487%. So on that rental income of rental income which we have earned is doubly taxed income is this 2,20,000. That is on this dividend income of 220 and 1,96,000. On 196, how much relief will be available? So 19.6847%. And on this dividend income of 2,20,000, the country is charging only 20%. Sorry, my mistake. See, on dividend income, 20% is the rate that country is charging, and we are charging 19 point something. So on that, how much relief is available? That is 19.6, which is given 19.6847. So on that 2,20,000, 19.6847%, whereas our country is charging only 15% on rental income. We are charging 19 point something. So on that 1,96,000 ka rental income, only 15% is available as rebate. So on that we'll apply 15%, and that's how our total rebate will become 1,41,392. So please remember, whatever is the income from country M, country N, for all of them you have to separately calculate this reliefs. Separately it has to be calculated. After deducting whatever is the deduction of 91, whatever is the tax payable, you have to round off, and it will be 1,91,950. Fine. Then the very next question. Aster Inc., a company based in Canada, owns, manages a digital platform which act as a marketplace for buying and selling e-traders of different brands globally, which host advertisement also. Here equalization levy comes into the picture. When an e-commerce operator is there not having permanent establishment in India, earning anything from that portal because of resident person of India or because of a person who is using any IPA of India, then on that 2% equalization levy that e-commerce operator has to pay. However, section 165A of that Finance Act has clearly said that if the goods which you are selling on this portal has been purchased from any Indian resident only and you are selling to Indian person, on that 2% equalization levy is not applicable. Fine. So here first of all, this is the e-commerce operator, and this e-commerce operator is having this kind of customers, wherein Indian customers are there, customer outside India using IP of India is there. But the goods which you are selling over here is purchased from any Indian company only. So on this 2% equalization levy is not applicable. However, the goods which you are selling over here has been purchased from any another company of Singapore which is not having any permanent establishment in India. So on this kind of sale income, whatever is earned by e-commerce operator, 2% equalization levy is to be paid. So that is 2,000 number of readers. Per reader you are charging 12,000. So this is somewhat 2 crore 40 lakh. This is 1,000 into USD 150 into 1 USD 80, that is 1 crore 20 lakh. So in total 3 crore 60 lakh, and on that 2% equalization levy is supposed to be paid, which will become 7 lakh 20,000. During the previous year, ABC Limited, which is a company, which is an Indian company, that is a resident company, paid 25 lakh to Aster Inc. for hosting advertisement for promoting sales to customer outside India. If a resident person is paying something for online advertisement to a non-resident not having permanent establishment in India, then that Indian resident company or a non-resident having PE in India has to deduct 6% equalization levy. So while ABC Limited paid 25 lakh to this Aster Inc., which is not having permanent establishment in India, at the rate of 6%, 1,50,000 equalization levy is to be deducted by ABC Limited. If not deducted, 100% disallowance will be there. Achha, further they have given XYZ Inc., which is a company not having PE in India, paid 32 lakh to Aster Inc. for hosting advertisement for promotion of sales in India. Now if a non-resident not having PE in India paying something to non-resident again not having PE in India, section 165 equalization levy is not applicable. So this XYZ is not supposed to deduct 6% equalization levy. But the e-commerce operator who is getting something from a non-resident not having PE in India, on which equalization levy is not deducted for online advertisement, will be covered under 165A. So Ester Inc. has to pay 2% equalization levy on this 32 lakh from own pocket. So 64,000 has to be paid from own pocket because 6% equalization levy was not deducted. So now 2% equalization levy is to be paid. It is online advertisement. And that too by a receipt by a person not having PE in India. So that was everything about that equalization levy wala point. Last question. XYZ GmbH Germany is a foreign company engaged in manufacturing and sale of LED lights. It opened a branch in Gurugram for sale of LED lights in India. So this is XYZ karke ek foreign company. It has some branch in India and will sell the LED. Profit markup was cost plus 40% for sales by the branch. XYZ Germany also supplied the goods directly to the various customers in India. So either it sent the goods to branch and branch sells the same, or sometimes XYZ also directly sell the same. The turnover of Gurugram branch for 22-23 is 155 lakh. So this branch has done a sale of 155 lakh, whereas direct sale is 80 lakh. AO wants to tax the profit arising to XYZ from direct sale also and from branch in India also. Decide the validity of contention of AO with a view to OECD and UN tax convention model. So basically the question arises, whatever is the business profit arising because of business connection in India, then yes, whatever is sold through business connection in India that is deemed to accrue or arise in India, then only that much profit which is sold because of that agent, that is taxable, or even direct sale is also taxable. OECD model and UN model has the different answer. OECD model, what it says, only that much profit is taxable which you have sold because of business connection in India, that is 155 lakh and not this 80 lakh. But what UN model says, whatever you are selling through branch in India, if the same kind of goods you are selling directly in India, then both the profit will be taxable in India. So as per UN, total 235 lakh is the turnover, whereas as per OECD only 155 lakh will be taxable. So both the view are differed over here. If AO wants to tax total, he is right as per UN model, but he is not right as per OECD model. We have to see the countries following which kind of model, this treaty follow which kind of model. As per that treaty we have to decide ultimately. So this answer was as per OECD and UN model. And that was the CA final RTP of November 2023. A very good RTP is there. For May 23 also we have recorded the RTP and it is already available on YouTube. You can search May 23 RTP CA final JKSC on JKSC channel, you will find it. Even that was a very good RTP which was drafted. Solve entire ICI module ke all the illustration, all the exercise questions. This RTPs of May 23, November 23, past paper of May 23 and even one more prior attempt. ICAI case study based booklet is there. Nothing is required more than that. Any kind of doubt, difficulty is there, please reach out to any of the faculty who is teaching DirectX so far as JKSC is concerned. Our helpline number is also there. We all will be very much obliged to get your doubts solved. Thank you so much and all the very best for your examination. Thank you.